Okay, so we're going to take a look at some scientists and their early theories about matter. So we're just going to look at three scientists in particular. There are, of course, many more than these three, but for right now, these are our three main people that we're going to take a look at. The first one, his early idea about matter would be Democritus. Okay, and Democritus was an early Greek philosopher, and he was the first person to propose the idea that matter was not infinitely divisible. He believed that matter was made up of tiny individual particles called atomos, and this is where we get our English word of atoms. So he was the first person to really think about and look at the idea of an atom, and that we have lots of little particles floating around in the world. He also believed that atoms could not be created, destroyed, or further divided, meaning the atom was it. There was nothing smaller than the atom. And he had a lot of people that would criticize his work because they were wondering, well, what holds all these magical atoms together? And he didn't know, so unfortunately, he was really rejected with his theories about matter. So let's name off here the main basic things with his idea about how matter works. The first one is that matter is composed of empty space through which atoms move. The next one, atoms are solid, homogeneous, indestructible, and indivisible. The third, different kinds of atoms have different shapes and sizes. Number 4, the differing properties of matter are due to the size, shape, and movement of atoms. And 5, the apparent changes in matter result from the changes in the groupings of atoms and not from the changes in the atoms themselves. He was a very radical thinker for his time. He was in the 460 to 370 BC, so a very, very long time ago, way before they knew any of the things that we know now. So his idea was unfortunately struck with a lot of criticism, and that's what we're going to look at next. The next person we're going to look at is a more well-known philosopher from about the same time period as Democritus, and his name was Aristotle. He was a very influential Greek philosopher, and he unfortunately did not like this idea that Democritus had about this atomic theory and these atoms that were moving throughout nature. He did not like this empty space idea. He could not just fathom how we could just have empty space through which these atoms move around and flow. Aristotle did not like this idea of atoms. He instead pushed his own idea about the states of nature, with matter being made of earth, fire, air, and water. So he did not like this atoms at all. And unfortunately, due to Aristotle and his prior achievements that Aristotle had and the weight that he could throw around, he decided to kind of push Democritus out, and Democritus was unfortunately not recognized as the actual genius that he was at the time. And we had thousands and thousands of years then since we had Aristotle, where it just nobody did any work with the atom because nobody believed in the atom. All right, the last person we're going to look at today with their early ideas about matter is one by the name of John Dalton. He lived from 1766 to 1844. He was a school teacher in England, and he was really the person who is called the father of the modern atomic theory. He took Democritus' ideas from so long ago, from some Greek philosopher who didn't have any data to back up his theories. They were just that, theories. He went through and he conducted a bunch of research that went over and over and over, trying to prove that there were these atoms that existed and that we had these arrangements of atoms that made up our different types of matter and our different elements, our different compounds. Here are the 6 ideas that go along with Dalton's modern atomic theory. First off, he said that all matter is composed of extremely small particles called atoms. Next, he said all atoms of a given element are identical. They have the same size, mass, and chemical properties. Next, he says atoms of a specific element are different from those of any other element. And he says atoms cannot be created, divided into smaller particles, or destroyed. Then he said different atoms combine in simple whole number ratios to form compounds. And finally, in a chemical reaction, atoms are separated, combined, or rearranged. Okay, there are a couple of things that Dalton actually didn't get right in his theory, and that we'll kind of expand upon throughout the chapter. The first one is that atoms cannot be divided into smaller particles. Atoms can be divided into smaller particles because we have things like the proton, the neutron, the electron. We have even smaller particles than that we know of. So that's one thing he didn't get quite right. And the other he didn't get quite right was that all atoms are identical, meaning they have the same mass. And not all atoms have the same mass. And we're going to look at that here in a couple of videos. So mostly right for Dalton, but still a few things that needed tweaked.